Marijuana moms versus mental health dad. What that really is the McHenry County State's Attorney versus some dopey leftist legislators like Kelly Cassidy that are addled on marijuana business cash, campaign cash, I presume. It's the celebratory nature of widespread use of marijuana by some is bizarre to me.
I know. There's billboards up everywhere. It's, the drug of choice, please.
Peter Bach is a pulmonary physician at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York. So he's a pretty serious person. He wrote a piece in the Journal a few years back that we referenced at the time, trying to bring some sanity to this conversation and some actual science and information about the costs and benefits amid all of the unrelenting celebration of the ushering in of legalizing weed and distributing licenses to the politically connected in Illinois and elsewhere. He writes, actual medicines have research behind them, enumerating their benefits. They're made in the Tribune coverage of the story, too, because shoddy reporting, which is synonymous with Chicago media. Claims that marijuana relieves pain may be true, but the clinical studies that have been done compare it with a placebo, not even a pain reliever like ibuprofen. That's not That's not the type of rigorous evaluation we pursue for medications. What's more, every intoxicant would pass that sort of test because you don't experience pain as acutely when you're high. If weed is a pain reliever, so is Budweiser. And that's just despite the fact that 140,000 Illinoisans have gotten curious prescriptions for marijuana to treat various conditions and ailments. He goes on to say, marijuana belongs in the same category as alcohol and tobacco, harmful products that adults can choose to enjoy. Interestingly, the liquor company Constellation Brands and tobacco conglomerate Altria Group agree. Both have recently acquired large stakes in marijuana producers. Decades passed before we took on smoking and drinking with education, labeling, and other forms of regulation, but it worked. And deaths from lung cancer, heart disease, and alcohol-associated accidents are in sharp decline. We need the same approach with marijuana. Acknowledging that it is not a medicine is a necessary first step. So that's one of the biggest problems with this discussion is people like the quote-unquote marijuana moms at bar in this fight between McHenry County State's Attorney Patrick Kenneally and the Springfield legislators, labeling. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by the aforesaid McHenry County State's Attorney. Patrick Kenneally, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dan and Amy, for having me on.
So you want, you're essentially compelling that marijuana retail stores in McHenry County post warnings about the mental health dangers associated with cannabis, as were just detailed actually in that op-ed from the doctor I mentioned. And they say that you're demagoguing marijuana and you're hearkening back to shibboleths of a bygone era that have sort of racist overtones. So, I mean, just give us your perspective on this spat between you and those legislators.
Yeah, I mean, everything that you said in the lead up to our talk this morning is absolutely right. Marijuana has no medical applications, especially the cannabis that's being sold in these dispensaries. And the best that they can say is that it somehow treats these sort of nebulous and a lot of times dubious pain type of discomfort conditions. But as Dr. Bach says, it doesn't treat it any better than, let's say, Budweiser, because all it's doing is it's a huge dopamine dump right in your brain. And of course, when you're high on something, it's not going to hurt as bad. So following up on what Dr. Bach said, in 2023, there was a JAMA article, and it was a meta-analysis and systematic review, which is the gold standard of scientific literature. And it found that there is no difference between cannabis in terms of how it treats pain and the placebo, and it found that the more that patients had read about the medicinal qualities of marijuana who were given the placebo, the more their pain was actually reduced. So this is all a mental phenomenon, and what the marijuana moms has said, especially in their letter to me, is, well, we've had all of these experiences from many of our constituents who have come in and talked to me and us about how well it has helped them with their pain conditions like fibromyalgia and IBS and things like that. I point to this study and I say, look, it's probably true that these people are telling you the truth. It does help with their pain. The problem is it doesn't help any more than a placebo. So what's going on right now with the marijuana moms, and I think you hit the nail right on the head, is that this is just such an anti-scientific discussion that's going on. Irrespective of what you think about legalization, marijuana has significant downsides, and the marijuana industry's attempt to rebrand this as medicine so that it's not just popular among a subculture in the United States, but rather is popular amongst everybody and is fit for all-day consumption is really what the problem is. It's the lies that the marijuana industry is telling us through the mouthpieces of the Illinois legislature.
But there's got to be lots of money to be made. I mean, if state reps, are celebrating this, and also you have the tobacco and the alcohol industry buying or trying to get into also grow and sell marijuana.
It's a billions and billions of dollar industry. I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars was made by the state last year. The county of McHenry has made millions of dollars off of marijuana. So, of course, it's an incredibly lucrative business, and that's why we're tolerating much of this misinformation. The difference between, let's say, marijuana and alcohol is everybody knows that alcohol is dangerous, and people at Budweiser are not advertising their products to say this particular type of alcohol with this alcohol percentage is good for PTSD or is good for depression.
Well, and that's the thing that's so curious about this, too, how knee-jerk the reaction is, how defensive they are, because, I mean, you don't have the power to ban it unilaterally, and you're not attempting to. You're attempting to require the labeling, the warning labeling that usually goes without much fanfare when it comes to other toxins, smoking and drinking, for example, alcohol and tobacco. But here they're just so rabid that they go immediately to an argument that you're essentially trying to prohibit it because you're requiring labeling that adds some transparency to the project.
Yeah,
Yes,
no, thank you. The labeling that we're asking for is the most anodyne type of labeling that you could possibly ask for. It's basic information that's been recognized by all sorts of scientific institutions, including the Surgeon General, the National Academy of Sciences, the NIH. So it's basically that there is a link between marijuana and certain mental health disorders. The more you use and the younger you start, the worse the risk is, and the mental health dangers are psychosis or schizophrenia, anxiety, as well as depression, and then it's that the FDA has not approved cannabis as it's sold in the store to treat any medical condition. Both of those things are unassailably true, and so the fact that, like you said, they're being so defensive and they're being so combative over what is basic consumer protection on the part of the McHenry County State's Attorney's Office is bizarre.
Have you had cases that have come before you in the State's Attorney's Office where you're prosecuting people that are arguing that perhaps their defense is in part, because I've seen these cases, cannabis-induced psychosis is why I committed this criminal act?
So we've had multiple cases. Well, first of all, the mental health in McHenry County has begun deteriorating significantly since 2020. So cases of anxiety, depression, our suicides have actually doubled in 2022. The most common drug found, David Spade told him through the radio after he had been smoking cannabis all night that he needs to veer into oncoming traffic at 80 miles an hour. He ends up killing the driver of the car, and the passenger who was a father of two. The passenger of the car is probably never going to leave the nursing home because of serious traumatic brain injury as well as bodily injury that he suffered. So this is not an academic discussion. There's real consequences, not only in terms of mental health, but also in terms of driving under the influence of cannabis. My first assistant, who was the number 2 in the office, was hit head-on with her 3-year-old son in the back of a car by 2 stoned drivers and almost killed. So this is a personal issue for us.
Well,
right. So it's
the PR thing for. Oh.
Well, but I just want to. So that's not causation necessarily in whether in the suicides or the reckless homicide, but there's correlation, and certainly there is impairment, like in the case of your first assistant being hit by by that driver that was stoned. So I mean, again, why wouldn't we treat this the same way, at minimum, that we treat driving under the influence of alcohol?
Right, and when it comes to the correlation, this is their favorite tactic. It's like, well, it's just correlation, and people are treating themselves. It's like, well, first of all, no. The only reason we know that tobacco causes lung cancer is because there's a correlation between people that smoke and lung cancer to a degree that we can say that it's causal. It's the same with marijuana. There was a recent huge study out of Denmark where they looked at all of the medical records in their national system over the last 30 years, and this is a study that the industry, which is trying to get people to smoke cannabis all day, every single day, in microdoses and otherwise, to get energy, to sleep, to get up for work, to get creative, all the rest of it, and think about what that's going to do to our mental health. And the fact that the state of Illinois is not taking this more seriously because they're worried about a little guy in McHenry County killing the golden goose is insane.
Wow. Where's MADD in all this? Mothers Against Drunk Driving?
I have not had a discussion with them about this.
I mean, I just feel like there should be, because there's always a big push, PR push, like don't drive drunk, get caught, blah, blah, blah. But there's nothing for driving impaired.
No, well, I don't know how much time we have, but that's another major problem with driving with cannabis legalization, and they knew it. So cannabis is hydrophobic, which means that it hates water, and what that means is that most of the THC after you smoke cannabis is out of your blood within a half hour. So the way that so if you're driving under the influence of alcohol, let's say, there's a correlation between the amount of alcohol that you drank and your intoxication. It's not the same with cannabis. There's not a correlation between the amount of THC in your blood and your level of intoxication. So if I, let's say, leave the state's attorney's office today drunk because I've been drinking scotch in my office and I kill a family of 5, they take me to the hospital and they draw my blood. They know what my blood alcohol concentration level is, and that's what they can use to prosecute me. If I've been smoking cannabis all day and I leave and I kill a family of 5, it's probably 2 hours before they take my blood. There's nothing in there. Police haven't had the opportunity to do field sobriety tests on me, which don't necessarily even work with regard to cannabis intoxication. And so then the family will come to the state's attorney's office and say, hey, what are we going to use to prosecute this person with? And I'm going to say, we're not going to have any evidence.
Well, and the other thing, too, on this, we've talked to Alex Barrington, who's done a lot of research in this, wrote a book about it, and others that are in this policy arena. And one of the other points that's made often, so we'll make it again, is that the cannabis that's being sold now, the THC levels are 20x what they were, when your mom and dad were smoking a joint at Woodstock. And so, so just in terms of the intensity of the product, the toxicity of the product, it is not what perhaps a lot of older people think of when they think of marijuana.
No, this is not your mom and dad's marijuana. They've been breeding and hybridizing these strains to increase the THC concentration up to about 30%. The stuff that was available to me and my friends when we were in high school and college was about 6 to 7%. And what all the studies show is that the younger you start and or the higher concentration of cannabis that you use, the greater the risk in terms of mental health dangers. So
where does this spat between you and those Dem legislators go?
I don't know. I mean, I don't take any of this stuff personally. At least I try not to. I've lived in this state my whole life. I've already accepted. I have sort of a fatalistic view on the prospects for the politics in Illinois. But what I hope it does is that it raises awareness. But it raises awareness not only with regard to marijuana, but also how these laws are passed and who benefits from it. So Tori Hutchinson. So the cannabis was passed because the Marijuana Policy Institute in D.C. Joby Cates, J.B. Pritzker's sister, is on the board. They go to these Illinois legislatures, the marijuana mom in Illinois, and they say, hey, will you guys run our national interests in Illinois? And they're just tickled pink by the fact that they've been selected by this high-powered D.C. firm to run their legislation through Illinois, which they do. They pass cannabis in one day. I mean, that's not enough debate. They didn't bring doctors in to have hearings and all the rest of it. They just pass it in one day. And then this is what they said at the press conference. They said that Chris Lindsay from the Marijuana Policy Project wrote the bill, gave it to us, and then we passed it. Tori Hutchinson, who's one of the marijuana moms, is now the president and CEO of the Marijuana Policy Project. $630,000 was spent in Illinois. The Marijuana Moms benefit.
Story about Toy Hutchison when she recognized me at a club. She came up and introduced herself as State Senator Toy Hutchison.
Oh my God.
So I introduced myself as radio talk show host Dan Prout.
Right.
Because that's how we all introduce ourselves as our title.
Right, exactly.
It gives you the mentality.
That's like a doctor insisting that's like a chiropractor, I should say, insisting that you call him doctor.
Patrick Kenneally is the McHenry County State's Attorney. Patrick, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Really do appreciate you, and he joins us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Structural foundation problems? Permaseal can help. Hi, I'm Roy Spencer, president of Permaseal. Last year's severe drought has homeowners across Chicagoland and Northwest Indiana experiencing symptoms of structural foundation issues. Cracked brickwork or caulking, uneven floors, new cracks in the drywall or ceiling, doors or windows that no longer open or shut properly, or basement walls that are leaning or bowing. All of these can be signs of a structural foundation issue. Too often we hear of homeowners paying for an expensive consultation just to determine the problem. Don't be one of them. Call Permaseal today at 800-421-SEAL. Our certified structural consultants will thoroughly evaluate your foundation and offer you a permanent solution at absolutely no charge. Life's frustrating enough. Let's fix what we can and avoid even bigger problems. Call Permaseal today, 800-421-SEAL.